Hi students, in this video we're going to talk about the general academic objectives of your pre-step 2 from the course of Quality Management Strategies. So we're going to start by explaining what is a balanced scorecard. So it was first defined by Kaplan and Norton, and they defined that it is a tool that serves for strategy performance management, and it also contains measurements of the processes in order to manage performance and to assess if you need to make corrective actions in a process in order to improve it. It can be used by managers to keep track of the execution of improvement activities done by the staff within their control. And after the staff implements those changes, the management has to monitor the consequences arising from these actions that were made in the process, these changes. And also, it is important to note that the Balanced Scorecard has three main defining characteristics. The first one being that it focuses on the strategic agenda of the organization. It also selects a small number of data or items to monitor, and typically a mix of financial and non-financial data items are included within a balanced scorecard. Remember that we as managers are very concerned about our financial measurements, but also we have to think in the perspective of the client, and most of the times the client is not thinking about the financial perspectives of a product or service. So you have to take into account details like efficiency in the process, details like quality in the process, for example, not having defects, or in the case of a service, not having complaints from the customers about the service. So it is also important to define what is the balance scorecard used for. And here we have that the balance scorecard is used to monitor the performance of a process and subsequently intervene if the processes are underperforming. When using a balanced scorecard, you need to take into account three important steps. First, you have to measure the actual performance of a process. The measurement value is then compared to a reference value that you have to previously established, and based on the difference between the reference value and the actual performance of the process, corrective actions are made as required in order for the process to improve. And for the balance scorecard to work correctly, you need to consider three things in order for it to be effective or to give results. And the first one is that you need to have a clear choice of data that you want to measure, and you have to previously establish which key process indicators are relevant for your process. Also, you need to set a reference value for the data. And it would be a good idea if you could establish first an idealistic goal for your key process indicators, but also it's important to keep in mind that we have to pose ourselves a realistic goal for our target value, because maybe we have some I don't know, maybe we could have some technological difficulties in our process that doesn't let us achieve an idealistic value for our goal. So we have to keep in mind both. This is the important part of this point. And also, we need to have the ability to make corrective intervention. And this is important because sometimes we need the compromise of the top management. This is very important because if you don't have the compromise of the management, you will hardly ever achieve a good change in your process. If you don't have the permission to change things, you will never get good results and you will never be able to improve the process. So we also have to go through a series of reasons why a balanced scorecard can help you improve your operations. The first one that I have here is that by measuring your process, you gather evidence of the effectiveness of the process. Remember that you cannot improve what you cannot measure, and it is very important that you're able to have a value of what the process is giving you as an output for you to be able to assess if the process is underperforming or not. Also, by establishing target values for those indicators that you're measuring in the balance scorecard, you get a reference point to judge if you're doing good or if corrective actions are needed. This is what I just stated in the part that where I said that you cannot improve what you cannot measure. Also remember that by making corrections to the process based on evidence of what is going wrong, the process is expected to improve. Evidence-based decision making is very, very, very important because it lets us work in a realistic scenario, and we don't divert very much from the what it's really going on. If the process doesn't improve after implementing some corrective actions, you need to analyze your corrective actions and why, or try to find why your actions didn't work. For example, cause and effect diagrams could be very useful in this part. Also, you have to try a different approach to correcting the problem. This means that if you first introduce a corrective action and it didn't work as you expected, then you're expected to continue introducing corrective actions until some action actually improves the problem. And the ultimate aim of the Balanced Scorecard is the achievement of long-term financial performance through improved customer satisfaction, learning, growth, and operational excellence. So these are just some of the ways in which a scorecard can help you improve your operations. Finally, it is important to show you how does a balanced scorecard look like. In here I have two different examples, but they practically have the same dimensions. We have the financial considerations, we have the customer considerations, the internal business considerations, and the learning and growth perspective. And also remember that all of these process indicators have to be very well aligned with the vision, the mission, and the strategy of the company. Since we're talking about scorecards, it is also important to talk about key process indicators or metrics for the process. And in here I have a list of steps that you have to follow in order for you to select a set of metrics. And also, it is important to follow this list because just proposing a metric is not enough. You have to be sure that the metric that you propose is adequate for the process. So the first step, it says that you have to identify the objective of the process. After knowing what is the objective of the process, you will be able to identify the results that you expect from this process, which in turn will be very helpful to establish what are you going to measure. And also in this part, you have to define why you're going to measure it. And this is because you have to consider if the metric that you're proposing is a good performance indicator. And by a good performance indicator, we mean that you need to make sure that you are accurately measuring what you want to measure. For example, here I have a rhetorical question. If you get a 100 in an exam, does this means that you know absolutely everything that you saw in classes? The most probable answer is that you don't, because the exams they hardly take all of the concepts that were seen in a class and put it into the exam. If you did that, the students wouldn't have the time to answer all of the questions. So getting 100 on an exam, even though it is a good measure of how much you might know, it is not always the best or the absolute best indicator for doing that. So when proposing indicators, you have to consider costs and accuracy because you could find some metrics that are cheaper to measure than others, but they might also be more inaccurate. So we're looking for a good level of accuracy. Remember that it's hard to achieve a 100% accuracy, and we also have to consider the costs of measuring. After you have established what you're going to measure, after you have established the relevant key process indicators, you have to establish how often you need to measure it, and you have to define who will be the person responsible for this metric. This is very important because if no one in the company feels responsibility for the metric, then the metric will be left apart with the pass of the time. So it is very, very, very important to always establish a person responsible for doing it and how often will he be doing it. After you have these two elements and you already know what you're going to measure, then it is time to establish the numbers that the company needs to reach in this indicator in order to fulfill its goals. This is what we were talking about in the previous slide about establishing a reference value. And remember that it is important to consider the ideal scenario and a realistic scenario. The ideal scenario will help us to improve and leave the process in the best condition possible, but the realistic scenario also will make us consider what are the capabilities of our process as it is today. So the next step after you establish your reference values for your key process indicators is to start measuring your process. You have to do measurements and identify the progress that has occurred so far, or this is defining the current state. In in a normal process, you would be expected to, before making any changes, you have to go and establish what is the score that the process is getting for a specific indicator. After you have determined the current state of the process, you have to make sure to keep measuring it and also and start making records of the measurement. You could do some graphs, you could save some data tables, you could do a different number of statistical tools in order for you to keep track of the history of changes of the value of the process indicator. And after some time has gone by, with you keeping records of the measurement, you will have to then analyze the results that you get. After analyzing the results, uh, you will have to determine the percentage of change that has occurred within the metric. For example, this could be a change that for good or a change for bad. It could be possible that after 2 or 3 months, maybe the people got a bit distracted with the metric and the metric started to fall. Or on the other hand, maybe you were implementing some corrective actions and the metric started to go up. But it is important to determine the percentage of change and to know if it's changing in a positive or a negative way. And this is why we need to keep records and analyze the results. So after you determine this percent of change in the metric, you have to analyze the results to find the root causes and the key actions that led to the results, whether the results were good or bad. And regarding the analysis of this, depending on the analysis of these root causes, you will then have to propose corrective actions according to the results that you got. For example, if you did okay with some corrective actions, then you will have to standardize those actions and sustain that standard, because people, when they are introduced to a new standard, people tend to forget it, and after some time they don't do it anymore. So the sustaining phase is very, very, very important. On the other hand, if you did bad, use the root causes and the key actions that you propose to come up with a new action plan. So we were talking about balanced scorecards and metrics, but it is important to stop and reflect. Why are we doing these exercises? What is the value that it leaves this activity on our comprehension of the course? So you need to understand how to evaluate your own performance and how to establish relevant metrics. This is very, very, very important if you want to keep track of the quality of anything, practically anything. Also, it is important to remind you again that you are not able to improve what you are not able to measure. If you don't know what are your scores, your current scores for whatever you're doing, you will hardly have a base to assess if you're doing good or bad. Also remember that you do a process because you have an objective in mind. You need to ensure that the objectives are being achieved by measuring and presenting tangible results of what your processes are doing. And finally, you need to understand how to define which score is adequate for my metric. For example, in the example I gave you about getting 100 in an exam, it is very, very, very important for us to understand what is an adequate metric and how could we propose an adequate metric depending on a situation that we want to measure. Next, we have the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. And in here it is very important to note that while ISO 9001 is a certification for anyone, that proves that a process meets certain standards, the national quality awards are reserved only for the best companies. So this is very, very important because a lot of companies might have the ISO 9001, and this is a good thing because it gives confidence to the customer that the processes that the company follows are good processes and that they are processes that are managed through a quality management system. But it is truly an award, truly a recognition of your efforts if you're ever able to get a national quality award, because this means that you're not just fulfilling certain standards, you're also one of the best in the industry and you are an example of best practices. And this means that also other companies can benchmark with you. And this is like the most important proof that you're really um, a leading business in quality. So after going through all of this, what is the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award? So here's some history. The award recognizes U.S. organizations in the business, healthcare, education, and nonprofit sectors for performance excellence. And performance excellence is something very, very, very important. Actually, in one or two slides more, we're going to talk about the criteria for performance excellence. So the program's name was changed to the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program. Why? Because it needed to reflect the evolution of the field of quality from a focus on a product, service, and customer quality to a broader strategic focus on overall organizational quality called performance excellence. So it is very important to know that quality in the recent years has been extended to all of the other departments of the company, and also it has been extended to the mission, the vision, and the strategy of the company, because from there every action that you do emanates. And it is very important to assure that if we are doing a process inside a company, we have to be sure that that process adds value to whatever the customer is asking from us. One of the important things about the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award is that it also helps to spread the word about quality, if I might say it like that. By this I mean that the award promotes awareness of performance excellence, and it is an important element to competitiveness. Competitiveness is very, very important for the economy because it forces the companies to do good quality products and good quality processes, and it also forces them to do good things for the people. The award also promotes the sharing of successful performance strategies and the benefits derived from using these strategies. This is very important because this promotes the sharing of information between companies. To receive the Baldrige Award, an organization must have a role model organizational management system, and this management system has to ensure continuous improvement in delivering products and services. They have to demonstrate efficient and effective operations. Remember that efficient means that you are able to fulfill your goals, and no, sorry, effective means that you're able to fulfill your goals, and efficient means that you are able to do it with the use of the least quantity of resources possible. You have to provide a way of engaging and responding to customers and other stakeholders. So this is the one of the well these are three of the most important things that a role model organizational management system would do. Also remember that the award is not given for specific products or services. It is given to entire companies with all of their quality management systems and all of their strategic deployment systems. So since the organization serves a purpose that benefits the society, the organization also strives to maintain the trust of the public because the company, the organization has to fulfill its respective charitable purposes that we were talking before about sharing good practices, about establishing role models for quality management systems. So it is very, very, very important that the public trusts the organization, because if the trust of the public is lost, then the award loses its value. So the award could be misused. Due to this, the award could be misused to endorse the reputation of a company. For example, a company could be able to lend money to the organization in order for them to receive the award. So the company could get benefit out of this, because this is like a case of bribery. So this is why you are entitled, as a member of the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award organization, you are entitled to maintain the trust of the public, because then you could be accused of accepting bribery from companies in order to endorse their products. So in order to avoid this, or in order to make sure that the people trusts the board of directors of the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, the organization has adopted as four important principles as a condition to be a member of the board of directors of the organization. These principles are governance, stewardship, accountability and communication, and respect. Governance means that the board of directors understand their responsibility to manage the foundation with honesty and integrity. Stewardship means that the board of directors of the organization know that they have to manage and grow the resources of the foundation in order to maximize its philanthropic purposes and also to avoid unnecessary expenses. In the principle of accountability and communication, this simply means that the board of directors are willingly accepting their philanthropic obligations under the law. Also, the principle that speaks about respect means that the board of directors interact respectfully with the Baldrige National Program management, trustees, colleagues, and peers and partners. So, by following the last principles that we just mentioned, this is how the company ensures that they keep the trust of the public. But it is also important to speak about the criteria for winning the award. The principles are for the board of directors of the organization, and the criteria are for the company that want to compete for the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. And we have 7 guiding criteria that you have to follow in order for you to develop a quality management system under the criteria of Malcolm Baldrige. So these criterions are: the first one is leadership, and leadership deals with how upper management leads the organization and how the organization leads within the community. Strategy means how the organization establishes and plans to implement strategic directions. Customer focus means how the organization builds and maintains strong, lasting relationships with its customers. Also, it is important to have a measurement, analysis, and load and knowledge management system within your company. This means how the organization uses information to support key processes and to manage performance within the company. The next important criteria talks about the empowerment of the workforce. This simply means how the organization empowers and involves its employees in all of the activities that the organization does. Remember that under the lean manufacturing focus, it is very important to recognize the talent of the people, because it is recognized as the eighth waste of lean manufacturing. So we have to make sure that we empower our people and that we involve them and that we use their abilities in our processes for the benefit of the company. The next criteria talks about operations and processes, and this simply means how the organization designs, manages, and improves key processes. In this, I think that design for Six Sigma and design for lean manufacturing come very, very handy in when we are doing new processes or where we're improving previously existing processes. And the final criteria that has to be considered in the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award talks about results. This is simply how the organization performs in terms of customer satisfaction, finances, human resources, suppliers and partner performance, operations, governance, and social responsibility. Also, it it makes a remark on how the organization compares to its competitors. So this is kind of a benchmarking. Finally, after talking about metrics and scorecards and performance excellence in our processes, we have to go over the environmental part, and this is where ISO 14000 comes into the game. So, what is the ISO 14000? It is a family of standards related to the environmental management. Its purpose is to minimize how the operations negatively affect the environment. It also has the purpose of complying with applicable laws, regulations, and other environmentally oriented requirements. And the final purpose is to continually improve both the minimization of the hazard of the operation and also the the improvement of compliance with regulations and with laws. As of 2010, about two 223,000 companies were certified in over 159 countries. So this speaks about the universality of the standard. This means that if you certify in ISO 14000, you will be able to compare your environmental practices with the environmental practices of other companies. So this is very important when trying to do a benchmark of the best practices of the market. So in here we have the major objective of the norm, and it says that it's to promote more effective and efficient environmental management in organizations, and it also has the objective of providing useful and usable tools. Um, these tools have to be cost effective, they have to be system based, they have to be flexible, they have to reflect the best organizations and also the best organizational practices available. And they have they have to interpret and communicate environmentally relevant information. Prior to the development of the environmental standards, these kinds of actions were regarded as responsible care, but all of the environmental actions were not demanded by any government. But due to the growing environmental damage and concern from the people and from the governments, regulations started to be imposed and environmental responsibility started to be a must for all of the companies. This became important because having environmental standards is important when trying to share best practices or when trying to assess environmental impact. Why is this? This is because prior to the development of the ISO 14000 family, organizations voluntarily constructed their own environmental management systems. But since they were all custom made and each company defined what their environmental management system would be about, this made comparisons between companies very difficult. So environmental effects between companies were not comparable because the environmental management systems were very different between them. Therefore, the universal ISO 14000 family was developed, and this eliminated the problem of not being able to compare environmental effects between companies. In the end, it is very important for us to understand the importance of being able to assess our own performance, also being able uh, to understand that performance excellence is better than just meeting standards. Performance excellence is reserved only for the best companies, and it is important to take into account the environmental aspects because recently the highest levels of quality are also starting to include the preservation of the environment around us because without that environment it is hard for a company to survive, and it is also very damaging for the economy not to protect the environment. So ultimately All of these different elements that you were asked to do have a very deep relationship with quality, and it is important for you to understand how the implementation of these tools will help you to develop a quality management system within your company. Thank you very much for all of your time and for being present in this explanation. If you have any doubt regarding your grade or any doubt regarding the concepts that we saw in this step of the project, please feel free to contact me and I will be answering your doubts as soon as humanly possible. Thank you very much and see you next week.